This happened a long time ago. I'm guessing back in 2006. I couldn't have been older than 4 at the time. Yet I vividly remember the fear I felt during this encounter. It was an early summer morning, and the sun was coming up. But few people were out. In fact, the streets were practically dead that morning. My mum decided to take my sister, a 1-year-old, seated in a stroller, and I to throw away some garbage at the garbage station. I might add that the garbage station is kind of secluded from nearby houses, bordering one of those deep, dark forests of eastern Sweden. Since I was only 4 when this happened, the memories from the incident have faded a lot. However, my mum remembers it all. She says that upon entering the garbage station, she immediately got an eerie feeling of being watched. I remember feeling it too. I felt creeped out, even though I didn't know why I was scared. I guess I could just sense my mum's fear. Walking along the secluded garbage station, my mum suddenly stopped and told me this: "Hold onto the stroller as hard as you can, and don't let go no matter what." That is my most vivid memory I have of this, and I don't think I'll ever forget those words. I'll at least never forget how they made me feel. It was as if my blood turned to ice. I just froze. My mum sounded stern, but even a toddler can sense when someone's scared shitless. My mum was definitely afraid of something. The rest is just a blur. I don't remember much, apart from the aforementioned. So I'll let the rest of the story be told from the perspective of my mother. This is the recollection of her experience, recalled to the best of my abilities but in my own words. Not far from where we were standing, a truck was parked with a man seated in the front. There was nothing unusual. A lot of truck drivers stopped to rest by the side of the road. But this man was staring. He wouldn't stop staring. He stared right at me, examining my body, with the determined gaze of a predator. Gluing the 3 of us in his sight, he truly seemed pleased by the fear he'd instilled in our faces. And his eyes, they were something else. Almost as if they didn't belong to a human, but rather a predator of the savannah. I felt like prey, stuck in the claws of a lion. I just couldn't move. That's when he smiled at me. I remember that smile, dead, cold, calculating eyes to go along with it, and the way he licked his lips, almost as if to say, "I could kill you if I wanted to." I believe this was the point in time, into the strange encounter, when my mum told me to hold onto the stroller, tightly, and not let go. My mum is a small woman, standing at 160 centimeters and weighing barely 45 kilos, and could easily have been overpowered by the overweight man in the truck. My mum later admitted she was afraid he would jump out and knock her out, possibly assaulting her, or even kidnapping me or my 1-year-old sister. We bolted out of there. We didn't throw away much garbage that morning. We just turned around and walked home as quickly as we could, as a mum can with a stroller and a 4-year-old and toddler. We never spoke about what happened that day up until very recently. This incident lingered somewhere in the back of my mind as that weird thing that happened when I was a child, and every time I walk past that garbage station I get a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. As previously mentioned, this happened around 2006. Fast forward to 2008. The face of a 10-year-old girl called Engla was printed across the front page of every newspaper in sight. She had been abducted, sexually assaulted and murdered. And the perpetrator was an overweight truck driver by the name of Anders Elkland, now known as one of Sweden's most infamous killers. Anders Elkland was charged with the murder of Engla, alongside the rape and murder of a woman called Pernilla. He was also suspected of abducting another little girl who's still missing, making him a pedophile, a serial rapist, and serial killer. My mum says that when she saw Elkland's picture in the paper, especially when she saw those cold, familiar eyes, she knew he was the creepy man from the garbage station that early morning all those years ago. Thinking how my mum or my sister or me, all of us could have been his victims, sends chills up my spine. Anders, even though you're behind bars, let's never meet again.
Someone pretended to be my father and tried to break into our house. A little context. My dad and I live together in our own multi-family home in Germany. My dad has a serious lung condition. His lungs produce and trap an excessive amount of mucus. The trapped amount is huge and keeps his lungs from working correctly. It's pretty normal that he has to be picked up by an ambulance every 2 to 3 weeks because he can't breathe anymore. Last week, it was that time of the month. He couldn't breathe, so I called an ambulance. Soon, he was taken to the closest hospital. Pretty normal for me, because this happened at least 10 times in the last 6 months. So I went to bed after he got picked up on Tuesday. I went to work the next morning and got a text from him that he had to stay for at least 2 more days, approximately until Friday. On Wednesday evening, I got home from work and played a match of Rogue Company, when someone suddenly rang the doorbell. That's unusual, because we never have unannounced visitors. I walked to the door and was about to press the door buzzer to open the main door, when I heard more than one voice directly in front of my door. That meant that someone just got past the main door. Weird. I asked in German, "Hello? Who is it?" Silence for 3 seconds. Then a person who sounded like my father answered,
"Mitcha, it's me. I forgot my keys. Open the door."
I thought, okay, in that case. Wait a minute. My dad never calls me Mitcha, only Mitchy, and there was that sarcastic tone in that voice. I didn't trust the situation, so I called my father on his phone. If the person at the front door was my father, his phone should ring, right? Right, it didn't. Big whoop. My father answered, and as I suspected, he was still in the hospital. Meanwhile, the 2 people on the other side of the door heard my phone call and started kicking my door.
"Let me in, Mitcha. It's your daddy. Let me in."
Thank God that door is reinforced. After I threatened them with calling police and having a big-ass knife in my hand, they left. I heard their footsteps running down the staircase. I rushed to a window facing in the street to check if I could see a car or a license plate. Nothing. Just a few footsteps in the distance. They never came back after that. What's weird is that they knew my name and that my father wasn't home, despite his car standing in the driveway. Shit was hitting the fan when a buddy reported something similar. We called the police. Investigation in progress. My wife keeps on making me sandwiches for some odd reason. The house is just full of sandwiches, and I don't expect her to make me anything. As soon as we got married, all she has ever done is just make me sandwiches. We still don't have any kids, nor have we done anything that married couples do, because she just keeps on making me sandwiches. I have spent so much money on bread and ingredients for sandwiches, and I have talked to her about this. She doesn't have to make me this many sandwiches so many times over and over again. One day, to help her out, I decided to stop buying bread and ingredients so that she would stop making me bundles of sandwiches. When I came home that day, I saw that she managed to get her own bread. The bread belonged to our next door neighbors, and the ingredients she used to make the sandwiches were our neighbors' fingers, eyes, teeth, brain matter, and the sandwiches were so bloody.
"Here are your sandwiches, sweetie."
I don't know where he came from, and I had never seen him before in my area. A couple of months ago, I stepped out of my house. and a ragged man was next to my car. Then he shook my hand.
Hello. I would like to decorate my living room with your letters of unpaid house bills.
There was something about his voice which made me weak. Then he simply walked off. After that first meeting, I got a phone call from my boss. Even he sounded a little strange, like he was being controlled.
Hello, Martin. I am firing you because you need to start receiving letters about unpaid house bills so that the decorator can put it up on his living room walls.
I tried calling him back, but got nothing, and when I took my company to court for unlawful dismissal, the judge seemed like he was being mind-controlled. The same thing happened with the lawyers. The judge told me that it was for a good reason that I'd been fired, so that I could start receiving letters about unpaid house bills for the decorator to decorate his walls. Any job I applied to, they would all reject me for the same reasons, which is that I needed to start getting letters about unpaid bills for the decorator's living room walls. As I couldn't find another job, I started receiving bill payments for water, heating, mortgage, electricity, and tax, which all quickly added up. Then those letters disappeared, and I got a letter from the decorator which read,
I have received enough letters from you about the unpaid house bills. They look very nice on my living room walls.
After that, I was finally able to get a job. But one day, the decorator randomly met up with me at the supermarket.
My front room walls will look nice with newspaper clippings that are about the death of your family.
He then simply walked away. I contacted the police and told them everything, but they simply told me,
Sir, of course your family needs to die, because the decorator needs newspaper clippings about your murdered family for his front room wall.
This happened when I was in kindergarten. It was 1993, and my family lived in West Jordan, Utah. I was in the afternoon class, so I didn't have to go to school until later. That day, my other siblings were at school, and both my parents were at work. But I had an older sister that stayed home sick. She couldn't walk me to school, but I didn't want to walk by myself. We decided that I could try and walk with a friend that lived across the street that also went to school when I did. Even though I was only going across the street, I was nervous to cross, as this friend was in the center of a cul-de-sac. It wasn't that big, but to my 5-year-old self, at the time, the street looked massive. My sister promised that she would stand by the window and watch me walk across the cul-de-sac. I went out the door and walked to my friend's house, up the porch, and knocked. I waited a few moments, then knocked again. This time a little louder. Still no answer, so I turned to leave. Just as I turned, this truck pulled up in the middle of the street and parked at an angle. There was a man and woman inside of it. I can't remember what the woman looked like, but the way the man was looking at me is forever burned into my brain. The predatory gaze was like a demon commanding its victim to come to it. I gasped and ducked behind the brick wall with arches. I was terrified and felt that hiding like I did was useless. He saw me, but I didn't move. I stood there pressed against the wall, terrified he was going to come out and grab me. I thought to myself I needed to run, but my body refused to move. I don't know why he didn't just come after me, but he didn't. He just sat in the truck, waiting and watching. I don't know how much time went by, but it felt like forever, until the truck pulled away. When he was out of sight, I ran back to my house. My sister threw her arms around me. She walked me to school, and the man in the truck followed her until she reached the school grounds. He then quickly disappeared. We never saw him again. I'm 32 now, and a single mum of teenage girls. Since reflecting on that day, it made sense why I didn't run. The way he was parked on the street was set up that if I were to run either way, all they had to do was open the door and scoop me up. I know not everyone believes in a higher power, but I have no doubt in my mind that a guardian angel was there, with me, that day. It was my instinct to run, but something told me to stay put, to wait it out. Thinking back on that day, I don't know what would have happened had I gone with my instinct. What I do know is I probably wouldn't be here today. Parents, if you're watching this, don't ever let your little ones go anywhere alone. Not even across the street.